That's Genucel.com. There's really a great new book out, really smart book, by the way, and that's what you're all about in my audience. The Firey Angel, Art, Culture, Sex, Politics, and the Struggle for the Soul of the West by Michael Walsh. Michael, how are you, sir?
Fine, Mark. Thank you so much for having me on. It's good to talk to you again.
It's my pleasure. Now, this is a fascinating book because it's written differently, really, than any book I've ever read, because you pull from culture, you pull from art, you pull from philosophy to make the point. And your point is the West is dying. Our culture is dying. Go ahead. You explain it.
Yes, our culture is dying because we've been cut off from it, Mark. We've been cut off from it by the Frankfurt School of Philosophers, which was the subject of the preceding volume for this book called The Devil's Pleasure Palace. And because they want us to hate our own culture, they first had to make us ignorant of our own culture. So this book is a prescriptive counterattack on them. This is what you need to know in order to be able to fight back politically. I think too often people think the arts are just frivolous entertainment. They're not. They're the soul of a culture, and they're where our politics come from.
Now, the arts. Let's talk about the arts for a
Sure.
second. This Samantha Bee, these nighttime shows and so forth and so on. You would include that, wouldn't you?
Well, I mean, they're examples of popular culture, but my book is much more focused on real art, painting, poetry, music, opera, the Aeneid by Virgil, Plato and Aristotle. I know you've touched on Plato in one of your books. Just these bedrock foundations of our culture. That's primarily what I'm focused on, to reconnect us to our Greco-Roman Judeo-Christian heritage.
How do we get people to focus on this?
Well, I think we got to start reading again. I mean, you know, we cannot be completely consumed by our cell phones and our smartphones and our tablets and all this transient stuff. What I really wanted to do, Mark, in this book is write a book about politics without mentioning a single contemporary politician. I didn't want to talk about Obama and the Bushes and Trump. I mean, I wanted to have nothing to do with that. I wanted to really talk about the fundamental issues, because that way we are talking about things that the Greeks dealt with, the Romans dealt with these same problems, the Middle Ages dealt with these same problems. And we just keep thinking our experience is completely sui generis. No, of course not. And if we just connect ourselves back to our own culture, we can stand up to the cultural Marxists, we can stand up to the Islamists, and we can say this far and no farther. We must do that.
And you do call them cultural Marxists, which is a good phrase.
I think it's a fine phrase. I just read today that it's an example of the neo-Nazi alt-right, which is, you know, the left is so crazy now that I hesitate to even look at anything that they
Well,
write.
you offended them. You nailed it on the head, you see.
Yeah, apparently I have offended them, and I'm all broke up about it, as you can tell.
Yes.
So we're gonna get them, and this book is meant to give every parent, every college student, every high school student, every kid who wants to learn about his own culture. You know, you want a great story? Read the Aeneid. Just read the Aeneid. It's about the founding of Rome. How cool is that? Maybe you watched Rome on HBO when it came out 10, 15 years ago. Well, this is the real, you know, the great original Virgil poem. It's about heroes, and it's about the sacrifices we make, and it's about the decisions you have to make. When Aeneas has to leave Dido in Carthage and go off to found Rome, he's torn between the greatest love of his life and his duty to his mother, Venus, and to history and to everybody else. I mean, it's heartbreaking. So this is what I want to reconnect our own culture back with our great stories, because they're amazing stories.
Well, your book does this because, you know, you get into one of my heroes here, Aristotle, and also one of the great, more modern thinkers, probably not way out there, but still somebody that caught my attention when I was young, the late Alan Bloom.
Yes.
So you cover a lot of territory. Tell me what you think about Alan Bloom and why you included him in your book.
Well, I think The Closing of the American Mind was a very important book. It came out in the 80s, as I recall, Mark, and it got a lot of attention. I was writing for Time magazine at that point, and I'm sure we wrote quite a bit about it. And he sounded this warning bell, 30-some years ago, and it's only gotten worse, and we are creating a culture of ignorance, which is exactly what they're counting on in order to undermine us. They take our moral principles out from underneath us. Forget religion. This is one of the arguments I make. a lot of these principles come before there even was organized religion. And organized religion, which is at once revelatory and codifying, it's taken many of these things and created a religion around them. And our religion is about heroism and about individual destiny and about the importance of standing up and doing the right thing. And what's not to like about that? How can you hate Western culture, Mark?
And yet you are a religious man, are you not?
Well, I'm a cradle Catholic, so that, that comes with all that comes with, and I do try to go to Mass as often as possible, and I would say I am a conservative cradle Catholic.
I just want to make sure people don't think you're Sam Harris or something like that.
No, I'm absolutely not. And both Devil's Pleasure Palace and Firey Angel have strong religious discussions in them, primarily religion as story rather than religion as theology. But, for those who are theological, we can mix it up in these pages as well.
My concern is people can go all the way through the government school system and never read anything about Aristotle.
Correct.
Isn't that shocking?
Well, of course it's shocking. They took it out. When I went to high school. Now this was back in the Stone Ages, but I had to take Latin. As a freshman in high school. That connects you to everything about the ancient world, including all the modern Romance languages of Europe. So naturally, we don't study it anymore. Why would we? It's just this. It's been I really do think it's been a kind of plot to cut the West off from its well springs, and you see the results in the coarse cultures. You mentioned Samantha Bee. You don't really have to look any farther than her to see how coarse the culture has become and how evil the left is, because they use this kind of thing against us, and they all think it's just hilarious. Well, it's time to push back against these people.
And it's everywhere, isn't it? You look at the media. I mean, the media are they're dripping with this anti, or as you call it, cultural Marxism, are they not?
Yes, they are. They're like sniggering little children, as you know. Someone uses a naughty word, and they all snigger, and they all have to write a story about it. I mean, honest, Mark, I started in journalism in 1972, so I've been at it quite a while. I've never seen it. It's just complete corrupted crap at this point. It's disheartening after having spent so much time to see what reporting has now become. It's about gossip, it's about gotcha, and it's about dirty words. It really is like the teacher left the classroom and all the kids are running around crazy. It's just appalling.
Just so people know a little bit about your background, you've been a journalist, as you point out, but you spent a lot of time as a screenwriter.
Yes, that's true.
What kind of screenwriting have you done?
Well, I wrote screenwriters. You can always ask them, what movies have you done? And we're going to name 20, but you haven't seen them because most of them haven't gotten produced. That's not fully the goal of screenwriting. I wrote a movie called Cadet Kelly, to start with, the one that did get produced, which was a huge hit for the Disney Channel, about a little kind of hippie girl who gets sent to military school and has to learn discipline. And it was a fun movie to write. I wrote it with the great Gail Parent, my co-writer. We had a great time doing it. But I have a couple scripts that are out right now in the production pipeline, and one of them is called Charlie, which is about the Cold War, which I experienced and lived through living in Germany and in the Eastern Bloc during the period the wall came down. I've got a movie about Ella Fitzgerald and Billie Holiday, which we're out to directors on right now, and that's a wonderful story about the two greatest singers of the mid-20th century. So things like that. And whatever interests me, I write. I worked on a big project that was set in Shanghai. It's a fun profession, and you don't bring politics into it. That's the whole key to success in Hollywood.
There have been a number of, at least to me, very important journalist philosophers. People who've seen things, they write about things, and then it causes them to think more deeply. Well, you remind me of that.
Well, thank you. I mean, that's very. I wouldn't call myself a philosopher, but what I would say is I had an unusual background. My father is a Marine Corps officer. Today's his 92nd birthday. He was awarded.
Amen. God bless.
God bless him. He was awarded a Bronze Star at the Chosin Reservoir, one of the greatest battles in the history of the United States Marine Corps, and he came home to father 4 more children after me. So happy birthday, Pop. Mm-hmm. I had this odd background where.
What is his name?
His name is John Joseph Walsh, retired lieutenant colonel in the United States Marine Corps.
Well, we salute him. God bless you.
Thank you, Mark. I appreciate that. But we moved around, so you don't have a consistent school, you don't have consistent friends. All I had, besides my family, was books and music, because I'm a pianist, and so I just learned to turn inside, and we traveled all over the world. And if you open your eyes and see things. And, of course, I was a foreign correspondent for Time magazine during the Cold War. You can put things together, is my point, and most journalists don't do that, and it's a shame. They don't have the language capacity, they don't have the historical knowledge, and they don't, frankly, have the curiosity anymore. And I'm sorry, because it leaves the American public severely undereducated.
Well, it's great reading you and your columns as well as or your op-eds. They're always fun to read too. But I want to strongly encourage you folks, get the Firey Angel. That's the name of the book, the Firey Angel. Art, Culture, Sex, Politics, and the Struggle for the Soul of the West. Michael Walsh. We will link to this. You can go on Mark Levin Show Facebook, Mark Levin Show Twitter, marklevinshow.com. You can go directly to Amazon, but I would encourage you to get it. And God bless you, my friend. Great job.
Mark, thank you so much for all your kindness over the years. It's a great honor to have